Hello, I'm Mari Pritchard Parker, Chair of the Lummis Legacy League. The Lummis Legacy League is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to continue the visionary legacy of Charles Fresher Lummis, with the intent to further educational, scientific, historical, ecological, and sustainable priorities that benefit the general public. I am honored to welcome you today and thank you for joining our Fall Lummis Legacy League virtual conversation series. I would like to thank the Friends of the Southwest Museum for sponsoring this series. Our subject this afternoon is the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation utilization of flora and fauna in the Los Angeles region. I'd like to thank the Lummis Legacy League officers Hollis Davids and Dr. Lauren Aronson for their tireless work in organizing this conversation series. I want to give a huge thank you to the board members, Matt Tutimas and our distinguished speaker this afternoon, and John Torres, who will be the moderator today. Our Setting the Record Straight conversation series is our effort to present the facts about the Native American history locally and working to right some of the injustices still being experienced by the indigenous people of the greater Los Angeles area. The next virtual conversation will take place on December 1st at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our subject will be tribal cultural resources and challenges faced by Indigenous people today. We hope these efforts will inspire you to join us as a member. Information can be found on our webpage at www.lummislegacyleague.org. And now I'm going to hand this off to our moderator, John Torres, Professor of Anthropology at Mount San Jacinto College and Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians, Quiche Nation tribal archaeologist.
Thank you very much, Mari, for that introduction. Today we are featuring Matt Tutimas, the tribal biologist for Quiche Nation. He will also be joined by Chairman Salas to kind of talk about medicinal uses of plants and edible plants and the compounds within all of them that science, Western science, is now starting to take apart and understand, but what Native people have known forever, and that is our food is part of our medicine, as well as all the herbs and everything else that are part of our medicine to this day. And it's a common theme throughout all of Indian country. And today we're going to hear about the Quiche Nation, specifically their uses of plants and their traditional use area. And today I'm standing in my sort of Inca-style garden to show that we all should be growing our own kinds of plants and our own medicine. We all have done it in the past, and we should be able to still do that today. So welcome, Matt Tutimas and Chairman Andy Salas. Thank you.
So my family, especially my father, who is still with us today, was able to share that history with us and be able to provide that oral history that he has been handed down through his grandmothers and grandfathers, and experienced that life living with these prominent families, because my father Ernie also lived with General George Patton and Ann Patton, who were the grandchildren of Benjamin D. Wilson of Mount Wilson and Ramona Yorba of Yorba Linda. But most of all, I just want to say today, we want to be able to share with you that unique history, those unique stories, and most of all, the teachings that my father, my grandfather, my grandmothers, and my family, my tribe, those elders of the past have passed on to us regarding the plants, the animals, and everything we share here on Mother Earth. But today, I'm going to hand it over to my cousin Matt, who, through my father and his father, were very, very wise and very intelligent of the medicinal plants and how we used them and how our ancestors used them and how they continued to use them and how we continue to use them today. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and he can take it from there and share the rest of that history with all of you. And I want to say again, thank you all for allowing us to have this opportunity to share our stories with you. Thank you.
Thank you, cousin, for that great introduction. Hi, my name is Matt Tutimez. I'm the tribal biologist for the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Keech Nation. I'm cousin to our chairman and our chief, and son to John Tutimez, elder of the Keech Gabrielino. I'm very blessed and grateful to be here today to share some of this information that I was able to learn from not only my uncle, but many of the other elders within our tribe who had a lot of memories and remembrances of utilizing when they were children of different plants and different even playing with different animals, but mainly different plants that they would eat out of the river and would utilize for just standard meals. My cousin shares a story all the time of how his grandpa, got fish, crawfish, watercress, celery, like everything from the Santa Ana River that our family had a ranch right next to. And so that's a lot of the discussions we're going to have today regarding the uses not only of the past, but also of our current generation regarding these resources. So first, before we get started, we wanted to start the way that Andy's dad, our chief, always starts off any of our events and any of our gatherings with prayer. And we wanted to provide you with a prayer that our chief says regarding
The four directions.
the four directions. Thank you.
Let us pray to the four directions: the east, the south, the west, norte. The east represents the light of wisdom, illumination, freshness, peace, and understanding. From the south comes the power of life, brutality, growth, and warmth. From the west represents of maturity, autumn, rain, snow, thunder, and also death, or the quality of things coming to an end. And from the north comes the cold, purifying winds, the cleansing of austerity, the strength of endurance, and the white snows and hairs of old age. Nawija, Aok, Anek, Tamik, Kwata, Tayai, Hanuka. Aho.
So we wanted to start off our discussion explaining why these resources were so important. So important that many of our villages were named after these resources. And what you can see on your screen is a map depiction of the tribal territory of our ancient ancestors, encompassing not only the LA Basin, but also the Channel Islands. And it's because of this territory, because of the resources that are contained within the basin that's surrounded by all these mountains, having transverse ranges and all your standard east-west ranges, you have a topography that just presented itself and provided for a plethora of different plants and animals and resources, also natural resources, mainly the biggest resource being not only the ocean resources, but also the resource of the land, which was the oil.
Right.
And those commodities, those were the components of why there were borders, like why there were what we call boundaries or tribal territory.
Ancestral territory.
Ancestral territory.
Yeah. And it wasn't because like today, and excuse me, it wasn't because today we're very it continues, we're very protective of our ancestral territory. It's not because of the boundaries. It's because through our culture and through our history, we've always been taught. We've been taught to protect everything. Not just in our territory or in our tribal lands, but to be protective of our ancestral territory. And that was because of the resources of that territory. Those resources that help self-sustain ourselves and help self-sustain those ancestors or those ancestral tribes or those sister tribes of those other nations that were nearby, or as far back into the Mojaves and as far back into Baja California. So that's why when you read about us, they give that example that we were the wealthiest of the Southern California tribes, and it was because of those resources. That's why we're very protective of our tribal territories. It's not a fight that we're fighting because of boundaries and that. We didn't believe in boundaries. But it's that resource that sustained us, that we were able to share with them whatever, when I say them, those tribes, what they were not able to receive, we shared with them, and in return, they would share with us what we were not able to receive, which they had in their ancestral territories.
And the main, idea or concept of our appreciation for these resources is because how we're taught from our chief, these were gifts of our Creator, gifts provided to us to help sustain us in this life. And these gifts, we had to take care of them. That's where stewardship comes involved. And we were not greedy about it, but we were protective about it. And we still are protective about it, because these gifts are what allowed humans for thousands of years to live such a robust life and a very pleasant life within this basin. And it's due to the resources that were just magnificent. And that's what's going to be our discussion today, are the slew of different varieties of resources that are innate here, that are endemic to just our area and can only be found in our area, that were so important not only to our ancient families, but also the families, the sister tribes all around. One of the examples that we are finding still today in the subsurface of the ground today is why am I blanking? Obsidian. Obsidian is a component that's not naturally found within our basin. That's found, up north in Blythe, or over in Mammoth up north, or east in Blythe, and then south in the Salton Sea, but not within the LA basin. Right. And you can actually go from speaking from our end of the resources that we exported out. You can go to Taos, New Mexico today, and all the way thousands of miles to New Mexico. You will find an ancient set of folks called the Shell People, or the Abalone clan, self-identifying themselves to a single shellfish from our shores. So just showing the amount of resources that were here is why, as my cousin was explaining, and what you'll see on your screen, is why an early ethnographer, Alfred Kroeber, made the statement that the Gabrielinos were definitely the wealthiest and most thoughtful of all the Shoshoneans of the state, and dominated, the civilization component when contacts occurred. And so this understanding of the resources and providing of these resources for the sustenance, for the life-giving values, not only to our tribe, but all the people who visited.
Community.
Exactly. To provide the community. Yeah. And that's the main concept that we're taught from our elders, is that the plants and animals, they were actually created before humans. So therefore, plants and animals are older than humans. And thus, plants and animals are our elders. They're meant for us to learn from. They're meant to be taught for them to teach us about how to live life on this earth.
We learn from them.
Exactly, we learn from them. And
What they eat, what they drink.
There you go.
We follow them.
So what you're going to see is a picture on your screen right now that shows a lot of this interaction with the gifts from our Creator. That's why the Creator provided all these resources, is so that we could have such a beautiful life enjoying those resources together as a community.
Right.
And that's what these resources represent. They're not representing being in the way of progress or being in the way of the Starbucks or the Costco that we want. They're here to help sustain us, to benefit us with our health, to benefit us with our nutrition, to benefit us with a ton of slew of other benefits that they want to provide to us, but that we are not allowing because of our separation from this natural world that was placed here for us. So the main plant we're going to discuss first was the main plant that was involved in creating the houses. The houses for not only our folks, but folks in San Diego had this style of house. It was known to us as the quiche. This dome-style hut is the strongest geometric structure or engineering structure that you can create, the dome. And that structure made it so that here the houses were able to withstand all the crazy Santa Ana winds that we get and all the different sort of environmental, pressures. They were able to be put up and taken down with ease in these situations. And the reason they were able to do that is because they were able to form this circle structure, this dome structure. And the reason they're able to form that is because of our willow. And without willow, you would not be able to create a circle. Because willow, it's actually the, as your dad tells us, it's the symbol for women of our tribe. Because willow bends, but never breaks. And that symbol alone is a very true identifier of our own women within our tribe and women in general, is that fabric of being able to bend and not break also allowed for the creation of these homes. And so willow, not only being a structural component, because without that structure, without that strength, the tensile strength that's involved, we would never have these homes that were able to be utilized on this whole landscape for thousands and thousands of years. And such a useful home that the tribes were actually identified by those homes. Because the Luceño, what they called Quichanos, that's what they referred to our folks here, the Quiche folks within the LA Basin, was Quichanos after the name of the home.
And there was there was thousands of Quiche houses here in our area, in our ancestral area. And that's why we were recognized by the houses we lived in. Those willow houses, it was just a valley, just thousands of quiches all through this valley, and that's how they recognized us here in the basin.
So the willow not only gave the ability to represent pretty much this tribe with those houses, it also gave a slew of medicinal properties, and that's what I'm going to go over right now, is the medicinal power that's involved within our willow. And not only the medicinal power, but also I'm going to discuss how willow, being the elder that it is trying to teach us on how to live in this world. Right. And I'm going to get to that. So willow, the genus of willow is Salix. And Salix, all of the plants of Salix, they all contain a compound called salicin. Now, salicin is a compound that if we were to take it and have it into our body would actually not recognize that compound. It would just strictly go into us and then flush out of us. Unless we had another little foreign critter, a different little critter that lives in us to be able to recognize it. And that's actually what's going on, is we have a critter that lives in our gut that is helping us in this recognition process. And that critter, probiotics. Exactly. Probiotics are yeast and they're bacteria. And these two little critters, they know what salicin is. Our body doesn't, but they do. And what they do is they say, ooh, I know what this is. And they take it and they repackage it. And they repackage it into saligonin. Now, saligonin is a compound that our body understands and knows and recognizes. So our body then takes the saligonin, transforms it and oxidizes it into our liver, and then creates salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is actually the active compound within aspirin. You look on your active ingredients within aspirin, you're going to see acetyl salicylic acid. The only reason they put the acetyl part is that's just the converse area. It's easier on the stomach when you change around the thing, but it's still salicylic acid. And actually, you can find on wart remover, the main ingredient is salicylic acid, thus showing its antiviral capacity. And that's the beauty of the medicines that we were given. They are all antibacterial, antiviral, antimicrobial, because through evolution, if we want to talk science, through evolution, all of these plants have had to develop defenses against molds, fungus, bacteria, viruses. So now we as humans, we just utilize those same defenses and have our body utilize it. But now getting back to the willow, the main story that willow is telling us, because as you remember, I said that the salicin, the main compound, is not recognizable to us. We need a friend. We need somebody that is able to do that work and then provide us that gift. That's the probiotic. Without that relationship, we would not get the benefit. And that's exactly what willow and these probiotics are trying to teach us, is that without these relationships, without this community component, without working together and benefiting each other, nobody benefits. The salicin would have just gone straight out of me, and I would have not gotten the anti-inflammation benefits, the reducing fever benefits, the helping pain benefits. That would have all not done unless we had the internal intestinal flora made up of the yeast and bacteria that are there just trying to help us with our nutrition, but also are helping us in these components as well. And so that's some of the wisdom that we're trying to be taught by these plants, but a lot of us just don't recognize, don't see, don't hear. Right. And that's what our elders try and get into our heads, is the value behind not only what this plant can do for you, but also what it's trying to teach you. So our next plant is elderberry.
Very good one.
Elderberry is one of our favorites, right? We actually traveled to another reservation, another friend's reservation down south, where we will go and gather elderberries together, because it's such an important food crop. Not only food crop, but to us, medicine crop for not only our tribe, but all the tribes of California.
And especially now with the COVID-19, this is the vitamin
becoming very prominent in right. that help with this new little virus that's going around, because we have tons of viruses that are out there. This particular one is one that may be helped by this component.
That's the immune system.
That's what we want to discuss, is the immune system component. The elderberry or sambucus has already been found in science to be able to combat the H1N1 variation of the flu. So whether it's influenza A, influenza B, H7N8, or H14N2, whatever the variation HN is, that's what this strain, it can defend against all variations. Whereas our regular flu shot only defends against the most prominent variation of that season or that year. Elderberry can defend against all, including some of our new ones of the swine flu, the bird flu, all these other types of flu that are just as bad as the coronavirus that we're dealing with. these viruses, because our plants are antiviral, antimicrobial, they have the capacity to be able to block a lot of these viruses from being able to replicate and do the destruction that they are doing inside host.
I remember
cells.
during flu season, we would stay at grandma's house, and when the flu bug was around, that's the first thing that she would break out. She would already have a jam of elderberry, and she would eat that toast with elderberry. And we were like, "Oh, Grandma, we don't want." No, eat it. It's going to help you with all the virus.
Right.
We never understood.
Exactly. It was just good
But
toast.
now that we're older, we understand, because today we follow that tradition. We buy them now in vitamins, and we use elderberry, or we go out in Southern California to pick elderberry
Right.
and make our own for our families.
And it's kind of interesting in terms of with elderberry. Back in the day, the elderberry has a big fruit crop. And so when it would fruit, you would pretty much, all your meals would have elderberry in them.
Right.
And so for weeks and weeks, you'd be ingesting all these compounds that have this therapeutic capacity to it. And that was part of the resistance, or the immunity boosting that was done back in the day that our generations don't do right now. We try and do that because it's interesting that the elderberry, when it fruits, it's in the summertime, so it prepares you for the fall and winter.
Yep.
And that's the time when you get sick.
When you need it.
And so we have elderberry. I have some in my freezer right now that I'm going to be making for this upcoming winter. And that's what we still do today, is create these. You can create a syrup, you can create a juice, you can create a jelly, you can create even elderberry wine.
And that's why we were very protective of our resources, such as these, where these are our native plants that grew here, and we were able to send them right over into the Mojaves or in the deserts where they weren't able to sustain or have this typical, or this plant there. They depended on us.
Yep.
So that's why we were, I don't want to say, I don't know if I want to use a name, use the term harvest, but we depended on this plant. This is what we picked. This is what we picked. This is what we send. These are the medicinal plants that we used for our ancestors and other ancestors of other nations.
And are realizing our generations today still need
Yeah.
these medicinal plants.
We had no doctors. We depended on the Creator
Right.
and all the plants that He's provided here for us, the land. And that's why we're protective of the land, because if you help and give to the land will give you back. That's our belief.
That's our belief.
Right.
And I mean, just one other item about elderberry before we go on to the next one, because we could talk for days about elderberry. Number one, they had 4 different words within the Kizh language for this one particular plant, showing just its importance within the culture. But it was also the musical plant, where the flutes and a lot of the clapper sticks
Sticks were made of that.
were created from this plant
Right.
because of its the heartwood, the middle part, the pith part is actually very soft. It's like styrofoam, and you can just hollow that out and you can create a tube.
That's right.
A hollow tube, and that hollow tube can be used for a flute. It can be used as a clapper stick. It can be used for a lot of different purposes, a snorkel, whatever you can think of. But this plant had a variety of multiple gifts for our families.
We recycled. We used everything and every part of that plant.
So the next one we want to talk about is one that was pretty much a staple within the food of the ancient folks, and that's chia. Pasiangna, Salvia columbrae. Pasiangna is the village that this plant grew abundantly. And so the village was actually named for the chia, right? It's
Yeah.
called the place of the chia.
Pasiangna, and that's in Chino, California.
In Chino, California, right in the Chino Hills, down into the over where Prado Basin is, all that area.
That's where that grew, right there.
And so this seed just to give you some ideas about the nutrition capacity of it. I mean, a seed, you got to think of it, it's a little living packet. It's a packet for life. And so since it's being a little packet for life, it has all the essential elements that our cells, our bodies want when we need nutrition, when we need to repair them. That's all your magnesium, your phosphorus, your alpha linolenic acid. It's all these molecules that work to help give us immunity and nutrition. And chia is just chock full of them. And that component where chia is now only used as like a, I don't want to say trendy, but kind of like a trendy ingredient.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that, oh, that's cool in a little fruit juice.
Yeah.
But if you were to use chia on a daily basis, you are providing yourself not only with nutrient-rich compounds that also, because the seed is able to hold liquid, and it holds over 10 times its mass in liquid or its volume, it was able to now produce time-release capsules of water in your body.
Right.
So if you soak this chia, you let it absorb the water, it turns into these little like tapioca ball kind of component. You drink that down, you now have water in your body to be able to hydrate you throughout the day and feed you throughout the day. That's why this was such an important...
The Gatorade of that time.
The Gatorade of that time.
Right.
And a lot of the travelers, a lot of the folks who were utilized...
They depended on that seed.
This
right
was
there.
the main thing.
That's what they threw in their water vessels as they went wherever they're hunting or on trade, where it was going to be a journey. They'd get some of that chia, throw it inside their water vessel, and drink it, and it took them further into whatever journey they were on.
And if you look at any of the diaries of the early Spanish that came here, they were always presented and greeted with gifts, with baskets of gifts.
Chia and seeds.
And chia was on all villages, like it was always one of the gifts was chia.
Right.
And if they didn't accept it, they would just throw it in the air. But chia, a very important.
This is a very important one here.
So this next one coming up is one of our very important plants, being Pluchia odorata, also known as sweet leaf, or another common name is marsh fleabane. This particular plant, we use it quite heavily in our own therapy because it's a wetland plant. And wetland plants, and actually we use it quite heavily in our restoration practices as well. Because wetland plants, the reason why they were so useful medicinally is also the same reason why they're very useful ecologically. And what I mean by ecologically is ecological cleansers. And here's what. When you're a wetland plant, you're very good at uptaking water and uptaking all of this liquid that is surrounding you. Well, back in the day, all that liquid was filled with all the salts and the nutrients and all the good stuff that was coming into our landscape, when you'd have rains and things of that sort. Today, when we have rains, all the toxins go into our waters. So these guys back in the day were sucking up all the nutrients, which what made them such very powerful medicine plants, where today, when they're put into the environment, they suck up all the heavy metals, the PCBs, all the toxins, all these nitrates, all these compounds that are actually polluting our water environment. These guys are able to suck those up and remove them from an environment. We can't use them for medicine at that time, but they can be used as not only an environmental cleanser, but also an environmental indicator, depending, because we can test those leaves and see how much mercury is in there, how much, different nitrates and different stuff that can be found in our waters. So Pluchia odorata is a fantastic plant, not only for its ecology component, but also for its medicine. And this is where we mainly use it for teas and for therapies where we ingest the compounds from this because of its high value of finding abnormal within a normal environment. And that capacity, that's actually a very huge capacity for a plant to know what normal is. How do you even know what normal is supposed to be? Because in our bodies, we get a lot of abnormal components happening. And the name that we give to an abnormal growth or an abnormal communication is cancer. Cancer is not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it's not another critter, it's a miscommunication of our own cells. So that's an abnormality. It's not supposed to be that way. And that's the beauty of these plants. They're able to find the abnormal within the normal. So just real quick about how this one finds abnormal within normal. This plant has a high affinity. So the saponins that are found within this plant, they have a high affinity towards cholesterol binding proteins. Okay, so well, check this out. It just so happens that cancer cells on their cell membrane have a high concentration of cholesterol binding proteins. So through natural affinity, this plant is going to find that abnormal cell. It's like the old Sesame Street song, one of these is not like the other. That's what it finds. It finds that one that's not like the other. And then it says, hey, you're not like the others. Is there something wrong with you? Do you need some help? So then this plant is able to then stabilize this cell. Because a lot of times with cancer, when you get a tumor or something, the reason why the tumor grows is because you have a miscommunication and you have an out of control growth that's occurring through the common cellular process of mitosis. Well, this plant is able to stop that mitosis process and stabilize these microtubules. Actually, if you look at your next slide, there is another drug that's actually on the market today for cancer. It's called paclitaxel, or Taxol for short, Taxol, and it's used commonly for breast cancer, for many of these different types of cancers. And this compound actually comes from the Pacific yew, from Taxus brevifolia, and that's where it gets its name, Taxol. However, it doesn't come from the tree. This is actually a tree outside of our native area. It's from up north, but it's within the Pacific redwood area. And scientists back in the 60s actually found a therapeutic compound within the bark of this tree. Mm-hmm. And through all that investigation and research, they were able to extract out these compounds that are being used now for cancer therapies. Well, this compound, the scientists always thought it was coming from the bark, but it wasn't. It wasn't coming from this tree at all. It was actually coming from a critter that was living in the bark of the tree. And I think it was a fungus. It's either a fungus or a yeast, I forget, but I think it's a fungus. And the fungus, the tree was providing the fungus a home and food, and the fungus was then providing this very protective compound, which is what they're using for Taxol, to the tree, so that the tree can defend itself against all these invaders. Mm-hmm. So again, without that relationship, you get no benefits. And without that relationship, we wouldn't get the benefit of being able to extract out this compound from this tree. So with that compound, they've actually done a bunch of different research on it, and that's some of this information presented to you right now. Is Pluchia works in the same way as Taxus brevifolia, as those compounds, in terms of being able to stop the replication process, or the mitosis, if you will, process of our cells. And the way it does it is that it blocks or it stabilizes these tubes, they're called microtubules, from breaking to make a new one. And this process, I'm giving you some more images to show you the actual cellular process that occurs, but this is the whole reality of it. Our plants want to help us, and they're so wanting to help us that they're able to control these situations and help these situations at the cellular level. They're doing all this work for us just by us breathing in some of the steam or taking some of the tea. all of these now beneficial reactions are happening within our bodies because these plants, they've been on this earth longer than us, and they know what is right and what is wrong. And that's the benefit they're trying to provide to us. So our next plant that we use quite heavily, California sagebrush, Artemisia californica. This plant, so this one has a special place in my heart because our chief, Andy's dad, had presented this plant to me as one of the main plants that's going to help me with my pain issues. I have a lot of ankle issues, and I have bone-on-bone interaction, so that causes a lot of pain and inflammation and all the slew of stuff. So Andy's dad, I was taking Tylenol and ibuprofen and taking all these pills that were causing internal damage to my liver, to my kidneys. And so I needed something that would be softer on my body. So that's when Andy's dad then created for me a poultice and a topical that I was able to put onto my ankles. And within 10 minutes, it worked.
Yeah, and it works.
And these plants, they have that capacity. And that's the capacity that they want to provide to all of us. But we look at them as foreign, as something that, oh no.
Just a bush.
Just a bush, exactly.
Yeah.
And when in reality, they are the solution to a lot of our ailments that we're dealing with. Real quick, just this one as well. We use this for acne.
Right.
We make a tea out of it, and then you take that tea and you put it into ice trays. You put that into the freezer, and then that ice cube can then be utilized on your acne as you're washing your face, in the morning and at night. You wash your face, then you apply this, and the cold helps to reduce the inflammation, and then the medicine in it
Kills
the bacteria.
Right.
So it's just simple treatments that can be done with our native plants that they're wanting to help us with, but that many folks
And all
don't.
these plants are here. They were put here for a reason. They were put here for the animals. They were put here for us. And we, man, today, we're destroying that.
Exactly.
We're destroying it. We weren't brought into the world in those prehistoric times with a jar of aspirin or some cough syrup. It was the plants that were provided to us. And that's why we're so protective and so, we're everything on this land, is sacred to us because they're there for a purpose. They're there. They were borrowed to us. So, and we found through our ancestors that those borrowed plants or medicinal items that the Creator has, provided here on earth is, we came to the understanding that we need to protect those. And that's why we're so involved in the land and the protection and preservation of these plants on this land is because right now we're in an area, we're in a position that we're lost. People are lost. They don't know what to use to kill bacteria, and they're there. It's in their backyard. They just need to stop and think and hear the native people and the usage or usages of these plants, how we utilized them in the past. We continue to utilize them. And again, I'm going to say, with the virus that's going around, we use these plants. We steam, we inhale, we drink the teas, and knock on wood, we're here still. We're not going anywhere because we understand what the Creator has created for us, and we respect that.
And the little caveat I want to put on that is the plants that we use, we grow ourselves.
Right.
Because you can't trust plants out in nature
Right.
in our basin because of the toxicity, the toxins that have put into our environment over decades and decades and decades. What we do is we grow our own plants in soils that we know are nutritious, that we know have the capacity to provide. So we encourage everyone to have a garden at their home and to start learning about your native plants and to grow them at home. We do not encourage anyone going out and picking plants from nature. Those plants, like I said, number one, could have been sprayed, for any sort of reason, or that plant needs to be there for the ecology of that system, where many of the leaves provide shelter and provide other things. So by removing those the biomass from that system, you could be hindering the system. So that's another reason. Unfortunately, we've ruined our system so much in our LA basin that going out and foraging like the ancestors used to do isn't a reality today. But growing these plants and learning about these plants and having them in your front yard, and actually you can even get a rebate from the water company for drought tolerant landscaping in your front yard because of these plants. But that's the one item that we want to just stress, is that the plants and animals, what we're taught is they too were given the breath of life. Therefore, we're no better than them. They're here as other creations of our Creator. And so they're here to benefit us.
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them.
Exactly.
And that's why, like you mentioned, when you go out and forage and just pick and start picking, people start to take advantage of that. And then you see them on the internet for sale, and they're selling, like sage. There's people out there picking and picking and picking, and pretty soon they're going to pick so much there ain't going to be no more sage. We, as Native people, only pick what we need to help our families, help our friends, help us with whatever medicinal medicines these individuals need. We just pick what we need. We don't get greedy. We don't take it all. We leave it for the next person behind us. That's how we've been brought up. We always think of the next person. So, and this is one of the purposes why we want to share this info, but at the same time, we need to protect that info, because like I said, people start making money off of it, and these plants are not to be utilized for that. They're to be utilized for health purposes.
To support us. To help us with any bacteria, viruses, anything, that's one of the reasons why the Spanish, why they were here. There's a plant they called Yerba Santa. Good intro.
Yerba Santa. And this plant was named Yerba Santa by the Spanish because this was the saint weed or the sacred weed, because a lot of the Spanish, when they arrived here, a lot of them with the diseases and viruses that all of a sudden they brought with them, they created tuberculosis here. And a lot of the Spanish were dying and didn't know what to use and what medicines to use. So the natives, our ancestors, would go out into the areas where they were able to forge the Yerba Santa and use it and steam it and have them inhale the steams, where that steam would enter their lungs and purify them, cleanse them from that sickness of tuberculosis, and they saved them. That's why a lot of the Spanish notes, they talk about that plant when they write to Spain, how the Indians brought the plant to them when they were dying and brought them back to life, or brought them back to where they needed to be to survive.
And a interesting note that I found in some of my research was that Eridictyon, the genus, was used in the U.S. up until the 60s as the main standard of care for tuberculosis. The plant was used. Then in the 60s, the U.S. passed a clinical trial regulation where they had to prove the efficacy of these medicines in order to, be passed by the FDA. Well, there were no clinical trials ever done on Eridictyon. Why? When that was the standard plant utilized. And that is the one main factor of why none of us realize that these plants have these values, is because there were decisions made way back when to push the plants to the side and create compounds or chemicals, synthetic chemicals for our medicinal purposes, not these compounds that are readily found within our native plants. And so that's the emphasis or the push we're trying to do, and today is to have science start to look at our plants and look at the values within our plants. That's why I'm bringing up all this science literature, is because some science is starting to talk about the facts and the information that our families have known for thousands of years. And so now finally science is coming aware of it, even though they say they're discovering it. But the reality is science needs to investigate into our plants, because we have so many compounds that will help in all of our ailments. The next one I want to bring up, I'll discuss it very quickly, is fulvic acid. This is something that comes from one of our main resources that our Creator provided us on this land, that made us be able to be ocean-faring people. And that compound is asphaltum, oil, black gold, Texas tea, all the good stuff. That resource, which you will see is only found within our territory and then the territory of our sister tribe up north, the Chumash, in those lands. It's not found in other lands. And that's why that resource, that's what we coveted. We were protective of that resource. Not because we were greedy, but because that resource was utilized for it helped to make boats, to make waterproof boats, to make your first
Baskets.
your first water bottle.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It was such a and to
Medicinal.
fix. And that's the part, the medicinal part. A lot of folks don't realize that oil. Tell the story real quick of what your grandma used to
Oh yeah, growing up again with my grandma, we living, visiting her. We'd get out there, my cousins, and we'd play football or tackle a guy with a football. You throw it up in the air and tackle each other. I remember one time I fell the wrong way and everybody landed on me, and I fell where I twisted my arm, and man, I was crying, I was in pain, and I couldn't play anymore with the kids there. And my grandma goes, come over here, let's go over here to the garage. And my grandpa had an old 52 Chevy, old 52, it was beat up interior and what have you, but I could still remember that old car. And we'd go into the garage, and my grandma would go, crawl under the car there, and see right there that oil stain. Get some, go like that with your hand and pull some out and bring it over here and put it in my hand. So I would get the oil, put it in my grandma's hand, and then she'd go, come here. And she started rubbing this oil on me. And I could just see her, like, I'm looking at her like, my grandma's gone crazy, And she's putting this oil on me, and then I could see her lips as she was putting this oil. She was in prayer, and she was curing me and putting this petroleum all over my arm. And she goes, okay, now come over here and let's wrap it with the rag. She wrapped it. She goes, just sit around for a while. Don't go play, and leave it alone like that. And let's check on it in a little while. Believe it or not, this is no lie. And I even tried it with my son, because he plays football and what have you, and he thought I was crazy. But after some probably 2-3 hours removing that, I could feel the warmth. After removing it, that rag from where my grandma put that oil, I could move my hand again like nothing. That quick, a sprain was healed just like that. She warmed it up. She I don't know what she did, but and she just told me it's the petroleum in that medicine. She called it medicine. To me it was car oil, but she goes, that medicine is what cured you with the prayer of the Creator. That's what it was. So I can remember those. My grandma, they were good teachers, man. And if I would have just been able to sit with them a bit longer to get more oh, it would have been great. But I'm glad they left that book that we have
Right.
in the back there. It talks about all the medicinal plants. It's actually their voice. They're giving the story to, I forget who it is, a gentleman that wanted to know about the plants in the 80s, and they wrote down every plant that they knew and what it was used for to help us. You know, it was great.
And so for the car oil, if you look at your screen, it's the fulvic acid that played a primary role in helping stopping the pain and helping. Now, fulvic acid, it's a very important ingredient that we are lacking in our diets today. It's usually found in our foods and is also found heavily within its earth compounds, within soil, within, asphaltum. That compound, our fruits and vegetables today, because they're grown in commercial farms, they have a low amount of nutrients as compared to something grown in other soils. That's why, our watermelon doesn't taste as sweet, our strawberries don't taste as sweet, the tomatoes, everything that we buy from our markets now are not as sweet, because a lot of commercial farms, their available carbon within their soil is less than 1%. So if you don't have enough carbon, you don't have enough building blocks to make all these other nutrients for that fruit, for that vegetable. So that's why that fruit and vegetable doesn't have that flavor it used to. So fulvic acid is actually a compound that bridges the organic with the inorganic. And so this organic compound needs to be able to connect with the inorganic in order to create these beneficial reactions. And very similar to a lot of folks when they're sick, they take zinc, they take a metal. A metal is an inorganic compound. That metal helps to bind or connect to our immunity system, a lot of our T cells and things of that sort, I believe. And that helps to increase our combativeness against, whatever cold or whatever we're fighting at that time. And that's where fulvic acid came in, was it's that bridge that allows that. So the science helps us understand what our families have always done and have, continued to do because of the knowledge of this living system that we're all part of. So now this brings us to the subject of food. And food is the one component that I believe we are all missing out on in terms of utilizing many of our plants for this flavor profile that has been lost to all of our palates for generations and generations. The food that is actually available from this land is very flavorful, very unique, and quite savory in its element. So the food aspect is one component that many folks of this generation don't even consider our native plants to be used for. And that's one item that we as a tribe, we utilize in many occasions, many of our native flora for the nutrient foods that are derived from it. And you can see some of the images of some of the foods that would be created from these plants. And you can create a whole plethora of different meals and different dishes from the plants that we have. And just to give you an idea of, how our diet has changed, because, back in the day, the food that a lot of the ancestors would eat, a lot of the old families, because of their nutrition aspect and because of probably their cardiovascular that they also participated in, these folks lived up to 120, 130 years old. And that was standard, yep, is to have a long age range because of the nutrients that were within your daily meals. And some of the replacements that you can see from some of these slides is, instead of seed and grains, now we have wheat. And we have flour, we have those components, and now you see we're getting allergies to these. Instead of the bulbs and the roots and all these things, now we replace them with starchy potatoes, which don't have as much of the varying nutrients as many of our root vegetable or bulbs and corms and things. And then, of course, the style of cooking back then was a lot of baking. You didn't have a lot of frying or things of that sort. A lot of these different methods that we use today to create our food that added calories that weren't really part of the cuisine of yesteryear. So the amount of benefits from wild foods is just enormous because of the nutrient value that's contained in those wild foods. And one of these foods that we want to identify for you is that of cactus, of nopales. Nopales are a food that we eat throughout the year. Any month of the year is always good for either nopales in egg and huevo with some chili, or you have, we make a nopales salad. But one of the other components of cactus that the Spanish actually keyed in on and utilized heavily was not so much the cactus itself. They used the cactus for a lot of things. They actually used it for even fences, right?
Yeah.
That's
why the name Las Tunas over in San Gabriel derives from the cactus fence that bordered the area around the mission, all the way up to Huntington Drive, and all the way west to Santa Anita Street, and down into the mission again. So the name Las Tunas derives from the cactus because of the cactus pear that was on the cactus itself.
And so you had fruits, you had all these components, you had structure to be able to keep out or keep in different animals, keep out the coyotes and keep in the cattle.
These were also the prison gates.
That's why I didn't want to use the word animals, because I wasn't relating that to humans, but they also did use these as prison walls, because how can you get over a hedge of cactus? And this cactus was 12 feet tall, 15 feet tall, easy and impenetrable. So, but the one item that I want to key you in on is what you're going to see in these videos. You see a little white
beetle or bug.
It's a bug. It's actually a scale insect, a cochineal insect.
Right, cochineal.
And this bug has the capacity to be able to provide a pigment that was very, very coveted back in that day. And so,
especially for the Spanish.
That's it. I want you to explain.
That's what the Spanish utilized that bug or that insect because if you get it, if you mesh it together, you all of a sudden
in the video
you got color, and that's the color they put on their the women on their white dresses and what have you, red or baskets. That's what they usually utilize there.
And that color, the scarlet red of that color, was a very prized and coveted color because that's the color of royalty and of that component. And so having that pigment just come from, this land, the Spanish were able to utilize in a lot of their clothing. And then, today we use it in makeup and lipsticks and in food, drinks,
I know that the
yogurt.
Spanish mixed it too, the women, to color their lips too, like lipstick.
That's right.
Yeah.
So not only do you have, the food compound within cactus, you also have this little scale insect that is directly related to that cactus, only grows on that cactus, that also provides this very valuable pigment for the purpose. So, some of the slides, they comment that even when Father Junipero Serra came out here, he actually made a comment. We found vines wild of a large size and in some cases quite loaded with grapes, because that's what he was interested in, grapes that he could make wine and send back to Spain. And actually,
these were wild grapes.
These were our California native grapes, exactly. Right. And he noticed that grapes grow well here, so when they imported a lot of their Spanish varietals and the French varietals, all those European, the old world varietals, he was able to plant those and create a very lucrative industry for him during the mission time, because that's what made him very popular with the Spanish crown, was because he provided wine that was very unique and very flavorful, very tasty, a delicious liquid that he could pass by and say, hey, this is what I'm doing over there in that new
And
world.
that, you know, over where we descend from the village of Siba or Savagna, La Misión Vieja, there's still wild grape down there that are growing. When I take my kid or my son and we go walk down by the riverbed and I kind of fill them in on the history, I show them the wild grapes out there.
Yeah.
My dad used to take me there.
All within our riparian areas, like you always had, you know, these bramble
Berries.
bushes, the berries, a blackberry, you know, there was always, you know, you have elderberry, your blackberry, your gooseberry. Then you have, you know, your grapes to your cherry, you know, a whole slew of flavors that were just so beautiful. And another comment that Junipero Serra made was that Governor Portola, who was the soldier that led, the general, if you will, that led the mission fathers in order to figure out where the missions are going to be, he actually made a comment that the people who living on this land were so robust, and what he put, a lofty stature, that he wanted to use them as grenadiers, as their cannon guys, because you know, it was a very nutritious form here. And so the last image I want to bring to your attention is this image of, you know, some of the ladies, you know, crushing a lot of the seed, and then you'll notice, you know, the kids that are around there, and then you'll notice, you know, some other adults that are around there. And that's the one concept, especially with our food, that we are missing today, is all of our food, it needed preparation. It needed to be prepared. So that preparation time, like you're seeing in this picture, that's when all the grandmas and all the aunts and the moms, they would teach the kids about, you know, what's important, the daily stuff, the different recipes, all the communication that happens, just like if you know, at home during Christmas time or during Thanksgiving time. When are you talking with everybody? When you're around the table, when you're preparing stuff, you know, that's when you're having your giggles. That's when you're having your times of just bonding with your family. And that's what our food presented. It presented an opportunity for this community, for this communion amongst each other, to be able to spend time and just stop the world, make your food, and spend time. And that's the component today. You know, fast food is our life. And we don't spend that time. Even eating the meal, we don't spend time with each other, let alone preparing the meal. Yeah. So that's what we want to leave you with in this final statement or final comment, is all the plants, all the animals, all these other elements that we're also given the breath of life, they're here to help us understand how to better live in this world, on this earth, together. Because the better way to live together is as a community.
Yeah, community. Exactly.
Thank you. Now we have time for questions.
Thank you.